Good evening, everyone, and welcome to our first annual virtual FantasyCon. My name is Denice Garrou, and I am one of the creators of this huge, enormous event. And I want to thank my ladies for joining us tonight. And we're going to talk about the price of magic and how to make a believable system within our books. And I wanted to start out by just going around to each one of the girls and letting them introduce themselves and telling everyone where they hail from and anything else that they want to sneak in. So we'll just go ahead and start with Wren.
Okie doke. I'm Wren Michaels, and I write paranormal romance, urban fantasy, and erotic fantasy romance. And I'm living here in Houston, Texas, but I'm actually a cheesehead from Wisconsin. Transferred to Texas for love. So I've been writing for several years now, and my first books came out this year. So I'm a newbie author, and I'm very pleased to be here with you guys.
Great. I actually was born and raised in Wisconsin, so I'm a cheesehead.
Awesome.
Yeah. Okay, Marilyn, it is your turn.
Thank you. Hi, my name is Marilyn Almodovar, and I write young adult books about a time bender who travels through time. And I grew up in Puerto Rico, and that's it. Hi.
Okay, well, Amy, it looks like it's your turn.
It's my turn. My name is Amy DeClerck, and I write under the name A.R. DeClerck. I write adventure romance in lots of different genres, science fiction, fantasy, and most lately steampunk. And all of my stories have an element of magic. And I currently live in Illinois along the Mississippi River, and I grew up in North Carolina in the mountains.
Great. I guess I forgot to introduce myself a little bit about myself. I was born and raised in northern Wisconsin and moved to Colorado in '93. Started writing many years ago, but I write fantasy, paranormal, a little bit of romance. I really love to get into the historical, forbidden and hidden aspects of everything. So that's a little bit about me. So let's get going here. The ladies and I discussed a little bit of what we wanted to talk about in our short panel discussion, the magical aspects, and we kind of gathered that magic is cultural. What we write about is cultural, and so we kind of wanted to go around and share a little bit about that and how that fits in with each of our books that we've written in the past or what we're working on now. And, you know, some of us, I think 3 of us actually wrote like to write gypsy folklore. So it's going to be interesting to see what everybody has to say about what how they kind of derived at their genre of magic. So take it away, Wren.
Well, I wanted to do something outside of the normal paranormal aspects. You know, you've got your shifters, vampires, things like that. So I wanted to touch into a different type of magic, different type of paranormal. So I did a lot of research on voodoo, and I wrote a book about voodoo spirits, the Loa. And then also in my other book, Paranormal Romance, Eluding Illusions, I did the Gypsy Romani magic as well. So trying to expand that, because you don't see a lot of other things out in the paranormal world, and there's a whole untapped universe of magic out there. Like you said, there are cultural things. You know, the Loa come from Africa. Actually, the voodoo stems from African voodoo or Yoruba their culture, their religion, and it was transferred to Haiti. And as the slaves brought it over, the slave traders, it's based in New Orleans. New Orleans cultural, the whole city is based on that sense of magic, and brings in the cultural aspects. A lot of the genetic type things that magical beings, the shifters or the vampires, things like that, versus somebody who has to tap into nature, like the Romanis, the gypsy magic, who tap into nature around them. So there's different aspects of the magic system. So you have to do a lot of research if you're, of course, not magical. Right, what but if you're not a magical being, it's kind of hard. So a lot of research goes into it. I spent many hours researching voodoo, many hours researching Romani lore, trying to get it right so as not to, you can take some artistic liberties, of course, but at the same time, you want to stay true to what you're trying to write. And I don't know if anybody else is, come into, their stories. You take some creative liberties, license with it, but try to stay within. You don't want to write yourself into a box, because when you're making up your own magical system, you can do whatever you want, but there are some guidelines that you have to stick to, especially if you're writing a series. You have to make sure that your magical system goes through all the books. You don't suddenly change something, book 3 that was supposed to have, stay true in book 1. So it's a little hard to do, but anybody else? I don't want to take over everybody's slot.
No, that's fine. Everybody will get a chance to talk. And it's interesting too. I think it's always ends up a journey of self-discovery for each of us when we do our research. I find out a lot of stuff about myself. It's kind of like, why did I research this and why did I go here? So I think a lot of us, we do learn a lot of things about ourselves too. So, okay, Marilyn, I guess it's your turn.
Yeah, my turn. My book Interred, I have a time bender who time travels, but I wanted her to be part of a magical community. So I created the English Council, and within that English Council, there's different kinds of magic. And they all achieve their magic at 16. And I wanted, all of them to be different. I have seers, I have the warriors who are elementals. And I did research what the elementals are, so I could incorporate them into it. And then I stuck to my guns with, the whole system that I created, especially for the use of magic and how it affects the balance of things when you use it. And that's it, yeah.
What is the name of your book, Marilyn?
Interred.
Interred.
Yeah. Chronicles of the Interred.
It sounds fascinating. I'm going to have to look into it.
Yeah.
Okay, Amy.
Okay.
Down there.
So I actually write, several different genres, but magic, like I said, takes precedence in most of them. Most prominently, my Mythical Madness series is primarily based on Greek and Roman mythology, gods and goddesses, who are imbued with magic by the fates. But when incorporating my world for Mythical Madness, my characters are also literary. So I have Count Monte Cristo. I have Scarlett O'Hara. I have a shifter. I have werewolves. I wanted to incorporate a world where all kinds of magic are accepted. And so in the literary and mythical kingdoms are all connected by portals through which the gods and goddesses can travel. So I thought it was important to know about the kind of magic that I was writing about. So it took a lot of research into Greek and Roman mythology. And then for book 2, I shifted and moved into Norse mythology because that's a separate kingdom. So originally they were in the kingdom of Alfheim, and then in book 2 they're in Asgard. So I had to make
Oh.
sure that the foundation of the magic was the same, even though the practical application of the magic was different in each kingdom. So my characters traveled. And then in my steampunk novel, I gave magic a little bit more of a scientific twist, in which a previous civilization of far advanced humans created nanite technology. And once they were gone, these nanites existed in the form of aether. And so wizards and mages were able to manipulate the aether in order to achieve a magical result. And the world has come to a point in the steampunk novel where it's a struggle between science and magic, because only the people with the ability to manipulate aether can create the magical result. So the poor are more interested in STEAM and technologies that they are able to use and employ themselves without having to pay for magic. So I think it's important when we're talking about magic culturally is how does it affect the people who can't use magic? And so I tried to incorporate that almost like a political or a cultural struggle between the upper class, the mages, the wizards, and the lower class, the poor who couldn't use it. And then when I moved into my second steampunk novel, I wanted to go more towards the Gypsy and Romani magic and look at more of the earth-based magics. And so I really talked, and I've only just started to really study the herbal healing, because one of my mages in the story is an apothecary, and he meets a Romani woman, and so he's very interested in learning their style of healing. So he's just begun to understand the dosha, or the Romani herbal magic that she uses. So I'm trying to study that and learn it, and I think that it's really important, as Wren said, if you're going to write about it, you should at least have a good base knowledge. You can take liberties with how it works, but I have had to study herbs and, you know, how they work and what the base of their magic is. So I think any author who's going to write magic is going to find themselves in that place where they at least need to know the basics before they get started. So that's my magical systems.
Well, you know, and I agree with what you're saying, Amy, because I know a person who wrote about Native American lore, and he had a little bit of Native American in him, so he wanted to, you know, write a lot about lore. And I told him, I said, you know, if you're going to start going to book fairs and metaphysical fairs, you know, a lot of your audience, they already know a whole lot about this stuff, especially if they're interested in it. And if they're going to come to your booth
Right.
and talk to you about your book, you better know what you're talking about.
Right. Exactly.
I had that happen to me. A friend of mine came up to me. She's actually a practitioner of voodoo, of the African side, and she read my book, and she said that she was astounded with my take on things, for being not a practitioner of voodoo, how I nailed the characters and the aspects of it. She said that it's so often shown in a negative light, that the way, you know, that I did it, I took the time. You could tell that I took the time to do the research on the background of all of the deities and things like that, and she was really appreciative of that. So you don't ever know who's going to be reading your book. It could be a practitioner of a certain thing, you know, it could be a Wiccan, or somebody who practices voodoo, or you know, somebody of the Romani lineage, Native American, like you said. So always, you know, do your due diligence if you're going to take something that has a real basis to it.
Right. And I think it's always fun to draw conclusions because magical systems like religions are all of them have very similar bases sometimes. So it's fun to draw conclusions between like maybe two types of magic that aren't normally brought together. So like in Providence, which was my second Mythical Madness book, I actually used Ragnarok, which is north, you know, into the world. And so I brought in like H.P. Lovecraft, and so Ragnarok and the four horsemen of the apocalypse are actually four giant mythical monsters, like Cthulhu type pagan monsters coming up from, you know, and they're the sons of Muspel and all of these North mythology, but I also incorporated like the darkness of the H.P. Lovecraft mythology, because I thought it was fun to draw parallels between the two, where it kind of makes both possibilities even more, likely. Someone who believes in the North or understands North mythology would be like, oh, that completely makes sense, in reading the Cthulhu mythos or whatever else you want to read in that genre. So I thought it was really fun to draw parallels between maybe two types of magics that really aren't usually put side by side for each other. So I think that's a way for writers of fantasy and magical systems to be able to put their own spin on things without really upsetting anyone who's an actual practitioner of it. Not really
Right.
anything to believe, you're just saying, well, what if, this was
Exactly.
the case.
And that's the great thing about fantasy. We can always say, well, it's fantasy, but it's always nice to be a little credible too. So Marilyn, did you have anything to add, or? She's pretty quiet down there.
No.
I don't want to leave you out.
No, I was just thinking that I did do a little bit of within the research that I made for the book, I wanted to separate, like some of you have in your books, the regular people who can do magic. I mean, there's people who can do magic, but in the council, the people who do the magic, I separated it, and then I did the intern, who are actually buried, to access their powers. I took some people who would be like different or special kind of magic, like the seers. There's readers, who are people who can see the abilities that others have, and then have the regular people who can do just everyday incantations, protection spells. So I did separate them, and it was important to me when I was doing that separation to let the reader know the intern are the important ones, because they're the ones who go to the front of the battle. And that I didn't do that much research. I'm just because I'm just listening to all the research that you've done into different kinds of things. So my only research was really into elementals, and then asking my mother, because her mother used to belong to a mediumship group in Puerto Rico in the 30s and 40s. So I asked her about the things that she knew, and then I read a book about those types of people who do seances and things like that. But I couldn't incorporate that, unfortunately, into the book. But it'll be incorporated into another story.
Great.
For the future.
Great. Well, what I ended up doing was I ended up studying. I ended up taking the year and a day Wiccan courses, and was initiated as a witch. So that was a lot of fun. And then I ended up taking the herbology certificate course, and I became a Reiki master. So, I study a lot of what I wrote about. And it was really funny because when I was studying all of this stuff, it's like I had no intentions of writing about it. But I felt like a jack of all trades and master of none, and just didn't understand why I was taking all these classes. Why do I learn all this stuff? Well, 10, 15 years later, here I'm writing books about it. So it's been a really interesting journey. And my first saga, the Dragon Horse saga, was actually based upon my experiences in rescuing retired racehorses and helping them heal from cancer, and just the magical aspects of it. And then I got into the gypsy. The gypsy, I was so interested in all that, and because it's part of my heritage, and so all that worked in, and I guess I started out, when I was started out writing, it was like, my books started out almost as historical, because I wanted to really incorporate the magic and the witchy stuff and all of that in a believable manner. But then after a while, I started realizing, well, really isn't that many people out there that really know about this in the first place. So I guess I can kind of back off a little bit. But, it is good to know, what you're talking about. And, I associated a lot with everything that I wrote about. And I don't know if you guys felt the same thing, when you were researching and studying your characters and your genre of magic. Did you associate with any of it? Did you feel like that was something that was maybe, I don't know, from your past lives, or even if you believe in that, or, or maybe I have some of that power in me? I mean, how can you not help but go there?
Right. Well, I think, each character that we write is a part of ourselves. A certain, aspect of ourselves comes out into these different characters. When I was studying voodoo, there are a lot of voodoo practitioners that are also Catholics. It follows a very similar line to Catholicism, which I found fascinating. I had no idea. And it stems from that the slaves who were practicing their religion, the masters, wanted to incorporate Christianity, and so they kind of paralleled them so that the slaves could still continue their religious aspects, but they incorporated the Christianity into it so that it would be more streamlined with what their owners wanted. And so that's how that developed. A whole different aspect of voodoo from the African version came into the Haitian voodoo. And so it was fascinating to figure that out. I grew up Catholic, so I was like, I had no idea. So yeah, a lot of the research, it's just crazy things that you find out, and you can stem if you know why something happens or the basis for something in the magical aspects or a religion like that. You can also draw more stories from that because what was one thing that happens, this is a result. Same thing with the herbs. If you use an herb this way, this is going to be a result, and that can stem so many different storylines if you know if you have some research, some basis of what you're talking about. It helps you.
Right. I think the same thing can be said for the kind of magic that we write when we write about genetic magic and how a mutation or an ability that a person has allows them to tap into a magical gift that they have. And I know that in The Interred, she said that, there are certain people who are born with the ability to use magic. And in my other recent book that I just wrote, I kind of incorporated the same thing where, like 3% of the population is born with this ability to use certain gifts. And I think that when you're going to talk about the science behind mutation, it's important to understand, you're not only going to have the price that the magic causes, but there's also the fact that people can be ostracized, they can feel different from other people, even though they're more powerful. They may feel, what are the ramifications of a certain percentage of the population being able to use magic? We as writers start using or thinking about those possibilities. That's when some of our stories just really take off, because it's not just the fact that these people are magical, but they're also people, and they're going to react, with this. It's like one day you wake up and, oh my goodness, I can do these things, but how does that affect you as a person? And I think that's when we really get deep into our stories and our magic starts to affect our world building, is because it changes our characters.
How about you, Marilyn?
Yeah, sorry, I've been coughing. I think to go back to Interred, when I found out that I had a time bender, I wanted her to, as she uses magic, there's a cost to her because she's creating the time portals with her energy, so she ages. So she's a 16-year-old with almost white hair sometimes. And the same for the other things. And I wanted to incorporate for the seers the things that I knew from my grandmother and from the mediumship group that she belonged to. That they wanted to do things to help people. It wasn't necessarily for them to see into their own future, but to help others. I think it was important for me, for the seers in the book, to be able to help the council and to guide, because the time bender will leave the council. So she has that group of people behind her, helping her and reminding her that everything she does, can affect not only her future but the future of everybody. And I stuck to my guns with her because, pardon me, I wanted her to not be a moral force, but to kind of be one. Because there's, we have the villains who get, they do all the fun things. And, we have the characters, the main characters who have to stop them. And then she has to deal with, she was a young, normal person because her mother didn't want her to be a part of it, even though she knew that she could be a time bender. But she herself had cut herself free from the council. So doing that, I wanted Baxter to go through very real things like, I'm normal and now I'm not. So I have to go through these, and then you're telling me that I have this awesome power of, I can travel through time and absorb energy from it, but it's going to make me old, or it's going to, take days away from me. And it was, I think that was the balance that I was looking for when writing, and that's one of the things that attracts me when I read other books about magic. See how the writers, create all the world, and also, how they give and take. They're giving this power to the character, but they're taking away so many things in the same time. So,
yeah, magic certainly drives not only the plot but the character arcs as well, because the different variations of the magic have a result or cause certain effects for the characters. So that has to be taken into consideration in your magical world. Is how are your characters going to deal with it? Is it something that everybody in the world is familiar with, or is it just a certain sect that is familiar with it? Is it magical realism? Is it fantasy? It all is going to drive, your story. So I think that, you need to have a good grasp of what, you're talking about. I know I'm a pantser, so I just write as I go. I don't plot anything out, but I do have to take time to research the things and incorporate it in. So there is some sort of plotting that goes along with it. If you're a careful writer and you really want to make sure that you're doing, like I said, you're doing your due diligence to the sect that you're taking the information from.
Right. That kind of touches on a little bit of, morality and responsibility when we write magic. When I started writing my first saga, I was talking to the young kids, and I was trying to teach them you have to be responsible if you're dealing with magic in a real setting, if this is something you're setting up for yourself, and that it's not anything to fool with, and I think in being responsible, and also what I read about is reconnecting with the earth, and that kind of leads into my next question for you guys is, what is it about yourself that you think you chose to write about magic? I mean, is there something about yourself? Not everybody likes, magic, or like Tolkien says, when he wrote Lord of the Rings, he was writing about the forbidden past. Do you believe that, in some aspect this could be true? I mean, yeah, we know, the Wiccan and all that stuff. But what part of you, what made you decide to write about magic? And I just got the warning that we have 10 minutes. Is that an easy question to answer?
I think for me, it's because I enjoy reading paranormal and urban fantasy, because I like to get lost in a magical world. I like the ability to do something that I cannot do, to experience something that I can't experience in real life. So I like to get lost in that book. And as I'm writing, I'm becoming those characters, and I'm able to experience it through my characters, because every piece of my characters is a little piece of me. And so I think, we get to kind of transpose ourselves from our being onto the page to live vicariously through them.
Marilyn?
I would agree.
That's okay. Go ahead.
No, go ahead, Marilyn.
I grew up with, reading about magic, and, then afterwards with Harry Potter and all those things that came after Harry Potter. I knew I wanted to write something related to magic. When I was growing up, I heard about all the things that people in the family did, and it created that little thing in my head about what if I could do these things, and that's why I had a fun time writing it, and I think I will again. Amy.
I think I write magic and magical systems, probably maybe a mixture of both of you guys. I read them, and I like to get lost in them, and I love to write them. Primarily, my books are always romantically centered. So I like my characters to have struggles, and sometimes the best adventures they can have are magical ones. So I think that makes it a complete open possibility for anything you want to write, and for anything to happen at any time. So it's a freeing sensation. I'm not under the constraints of a contemporary setting where I'm bound by the laws of physics and science. So I can do whatever I want. My characters can do whatever they want, and eventually get where I want them to be, any way I want them to get there. So I think for me as a writer, that's what's most exciting, is that I can stretch my boundaries and do anything to them at any time that I want, within the bounds of my magical system. And I love world building. I think it's very important, and I love building strong characters. So being able to do that with magic is even more fun. So I think that's probably the reason I add magic into my stories.
Yeah, and I think the world building is so much fun because it's kind of like you build the world that maybe you want to live in, I mean, I'd love to live in Rivendell. I'm sorry.
I'll build a house right next to you.
I wouldn't mind being Arwen and get the king in the end. So
right. I'll throw down with Legolas.
Yeah, right. You're right. So, okay, girls, we got the warning, and I'm not really sure how many minutes we have left after our warning here. So, is there anything anybody wants to say real quick? Or are we all pretty much chatted out?
I think so, but it was a pleasure meeting you guys and talking and sharing. Looking forward to reading all your books, and hope to see you guys at the con.
Right.
Same here. Thank you so much for the invite.
Yes.
Yep. All the books are great. Can't wait to read them and discover all your magical worlds.
Right. Yeah, and I got a feeling we have some more Zoom meetings ahead of us too. So we have much more to talk about. So, okay.
Yes, we do.
All right. I guess, well, then that's us for this evening. And we just want to thank all of you for being here, and thank everybody that came to the virtual FantasyCon. And we look forward to next year. Yay. Bye, everybody.
Bye.